Well, it's been a month, but I am back, and today, let's chat about colorwork lessons learned. Shall we? Grab your project, come on back. Hey there, I'm Haley, and this is the Knitweekend podcast. I am coming to you from Nashville, Tennessee, and this is my space where I just nerd out about all things knitting and fiber. So if that is something that you are into, then I hope you will spend a little time with me. Today's episode is just, well, actually all of my episodes now really are just the traditional knitting podcast of finished objects, whips, and other things that I am excited about that relate to knitting and fiber. I just, for a minute, want to make an acknowledgement that the craziest thing happened between the last time I filmed a month ago and now, and that is that somehow there are 5,000 of you now subscribed to watch these videos, which is really crazy to me. I am just one woman with 2 needles and too much yarn, and I am so flattered that you all decide to spend time with me on mostly these days a monthly basis to hear me ramble on about this hobby that we share. It truly touches my heart. I think a lot of those actually came to me through Allie. Allie has a fantastic, I can't talk, podcast, which I will link to down below. And she's just a super cool gal, somebody that immediately I was drawn to, and she did a great episode in a high school superlative format of 10 podcasts that she recommends. And she did mention me, which was super sweet. And I think a lot of you found me that way, which I love. And then I do also think, you know, a fall knitting hashtag thrown in the algorithm draws a lot of people. So anyway, that was a kind of fun and unexpected turn of events, because that's not honestly something that I pay a lot of attention to. I was messaging with Hannah, who I'm sure most of you know as well, and we were just kind of chatting about like what it is to be in this space and who we want to be in this space. And it can be a little challenging sometimes because there are people out there who do this so well. And, you know, I've tried to do the pattern roundups. I've tried to, you know, do the, you know, I don't know, just like themed episodes. And I get really hung up on those. I just don't do those as well as somebody like Knits does. And so I just have kind of let those go by the wayside, and I've decided just to show up as me. So, thanks for letting me be me and hanging out and being along for the ride, right? Also, I will just say I had a lot of fun. On the last episode, we wrapped up the Lonely Skeins project, and that was a project that I did from, I think, pretty much all year until the end of September, where the idea was just to tackle those lonely 1 or 2 skeins that have been laying in our stash. I mean, we get the souvenir skeins, or somebody gifts us 1 or 2 skeins without realizing that we need more than that for a sweater or a shawl. And those just kind of accumulate and cause a lot of stress. So I ran a little project. I will say I was not the most active on Instagram during this project, so my apologies, but the goal was really just to work through the stash. And I chose one of the people who kind of knitted a bunch of projects up, or rather put the names in a bag, and my hairstylist chose the person. And Tracy was the recipient of a Build Your Own Pattern 6-pack through Ravelry. It was so fun to do that project, be able to give something away. I don't do giveaways really on this channel very much at all, because I don't have any partnerships. I'm, you know, not really into that. I don't like obligations, honestly. Like, I'm here for fun. But anyway, it was really fun to do this for Tracy. So I will share with you, Tracy said that I could share with you the patterns that they chose. And first pattern was Norma's Sweater by My Favorite Things Knitwear, the Baguette Jacket by Suming Kim, the Farnham Sweater by the Knit Pearl Girl, Small Fry Scarf by Samantha Guerin, Snow Crocus by Midori Hirose, and the Drama Sweater by Jennifer Steingass. So I was able to send all of those her way. I think that actually maybe 4 of these are on my own personal knit list, so it was really neat to see that, you know, Tracy and I had a pretty similar taste in knitting style. And couple that with a book that I was listening to recently, and well, let me go down this rabbit hole. I love the Libby app. If you have a library in your area that offers the Libby app, I highly recommend that you download that. You can have all types of free audiobooks at your fingertips. So love that app. And I was listening to a book called Ready Player One. This is one of my husband's favorite books that he read a while ago, but it's not generally my cup of tea. But I did go ahead and give it a listen, and I actually really enjoyed it. But why I'm bringing that up is that it inspired me. So between the surpassing 5,000 subscribers and the fun I had building Tracy's pattern 6-pack, I have decided I am going to be inspired by James Halliday of Ready Player One, and I am going to hide Easter eggs in my episodes. What does this mean? Well, for you, it means that if you watch, you're going to have an opportunity to have a gifted pattern through Ravelry with each episode. So how this is going to work is this. At some point in the episode, I am going to bury an Easter egg question for you. You're going to go down in the comments within the first 24 hours of the video airing, and you're going to use an egg emoji, and you're going to answer that question. And then I will post a little short video sharing with you who the Easter egg recipient is for that episode. I think I will try to post that video within a few days after the episode airing, just so that I can kind of quickly get those patterns out to whomever is receiving them. So a couple things. One, you might consider turning on the notifications if this is something that you're interested in playing along with, because you will need to note that Easter egg answer within the first 24 hours to be eligible to receive the pattern. And number 2, I do want you to be aware of bots. I will never ask for your personal information. I do not need your home address for this. I do not need your credit card info. I do not need anything other than your YouTube handle, which then I will announce and ask you to email me with your pattern choice. So I hope this is something that you find fun, and I am just kind of looking forward to it. Now the trick is really just gonna be that as I ramble on, I have to remember to actually ask the Easter egg question. I can totally see myself forgetting and needing to go back in and edit it somewhere. So if there's a weird edit at any point in this video where I'm suddenly wearing something different, that's probably why. Anyway, moving on, speaking of what I am wearing, I'm wearing the DRK Everyday Sweater by the one and only Andrea Mowery. I'm relatively new to Andrea's patterns, and I love this sweater. This is in very high rotation for me, and considering how often I wear it, it has held up really well. I'll show you the fabric. It is knit in Lavender Lune, their Grulla Sport. Now this yarn doesn't exist anymore. It was a limited run that I did pick up at a fiber festival. This is the type of yarn that you go to fiber festivals to find, because I wouldn't have found it otherwise. And it was just delicious. It was amazing. I love the textural quality of the yarn. I love the variation in the color. I love the kind of under and over spun areas in the yarn, and I just really think it adds something to an otherwise pretty plain pattern. So this yarn, I had 3 skeins, had exactly 1,000 yards, and there was a lot, maybe I had 4 skeins. I had exactly 1,000 yards, but there was quite a bit of variation between the skeins in terms of color and also texture. So what I decided to do, because I recognized this when I purchased the yarn and thankfully just happened to remember it like 6 months later when I was knitting with it, is I decided to employ helical knitting on this. Even though it's not hand dyed, it's actually undyed. I thought that would be a really great way to kind of create a cohesive project that didn't look either color blocked or lumpy in one areas and smooth in another area. So that's really the only thing that I did to this pattern that was a little unexpected. And I guess also I did 3/4 length sleeves. I was super nervous about running out of yarn, but as it turns out, I would have been fine. But actually, this has worked out really well. It's enabled me to wear the sweater here straight through the summer and into the fall. So no other mods other than that, except just to account for differences in row gauge. I think I was off a couple rows on my gauge, and I wanted to make sure that I had a pretty similar fit to the designer photos. So I did do a little gauge math to compensate there, but otherwise it's not exactly the pattern. And let me tell you, it is a winner. So highly recommend this pattern. And if you have the opportunity to pick up some interesting textural yarn, don't be afraid of it. You can absolutely find a way to highlight it and really just enjoy the heck out of it. All right, like always, I feel like I'm rambling on really quickly, but I think, yeah, I'm just excitable in that way. All right, first up in terms of finished objects, I'm gonna go with the more kind of vanilla knit first, and then we'll dive into something a little more interesting. So bear with me, I've got more goodies coming. The first finished object is my just like easy throw over that I talked about in the last episode. So let me start with the yarn because you know me, I'm the big fiber nerd and that's where I always start. This is knit in a DK weight 100% Shetland yarn. It is the 2023 shearing of dLana and Arabella from Leatherwood Creek Farm, which is just down the road from me. So I fully admit that this is knit on a 16 stitch gauge, which is a little bit larger than your average DK gauge. Okay, a lot larger than your average DK gauge. But I was chatting with Jackie from Knitting a Good Yarn. I assume you know Jackie and Carmen. If you don't, please go watch their podcast. They are some of my favorites. But I asked Jackie about her experience with Shetland yarn because she's just super knowledgeable about these sorts of things. So Jackie shared with me that Shetland is a super bloomer. So I thought, okay, all right, we're gonna roll with that. We're gonna trust that, and I'm gonna do it at a 16 stitch gauge. And I am so pleased. I actually think it's not super see-through considering that it's a DK weight yarn. I mean, slightly, but only when it's like really stretched out in that way. But I just have been wearing it with a camisole under it, and it has been perfectly work appropriate, which is what I was going for. So this is the Sammensat 7. Did I mention that? And I'm putting it, the designer and the pattern name in the details below. I did make a few mods. The collar has a twisted rib cast on, but I am not, or twisted rib collar, but I'm not the biggest fan of twisted rib when it's knit at a large open gauge. It's just not for me. It's not my thing. I did try it and I went, nope, trust your gut. So then I frogged that back and cast on using a provisional cast on. I then picked up my cast on, went down a needle size and knit in the opposite direction for a few rows, and then bound off using my favorite Elizabeth Zimmerman sewn bind off. So I won't go on about this bind off. Just know for now, I won't go on for this episode about why I love this bind off so much. If you go back and watch previous episodes, you will know, or you can leave it down in the comments if you're just dying for me to go on that rant for the next podcast. But for now, that's the bind off that I used for that. In the last episode, I also debated over whether or not to use lace or a plain bind off on the sleeves. And I'm sure most of you will not be surprised that I did go with just the plain bind off. I kind of just decided that simple was the vibe that I was going for with this, and I'm really pleased with that. Now, I will say Ode had a good point. Ode said that if I probably was just knitting it on too large a needle size, and if I had gone down a couple needle sizes for the lace, then it probably would have been much more tidy. And she said she would have preferred it. Sorry to disappoint, no lace on this one. And then on the body, I did just also go with the plain body, no lace. The original pattern does have the lace though. And again, the Elizabeth Zimmerman sewn bind off. I think the only other modification that I made was I did put in a couple decreases just so that it was less boxy. I find that I like to just put in a couple decrease rows along the sides, and that it doesn't make the garment, you know, really dip in, but it just kind of trims it in a little bit so that it doesn't have an A-line appearance. So that is something that I'm doing more and more, and that I'm finding I really enjoy. So that is the first finished object. I'm not spending too much time on that because it is just kind of a vanilla knit. What I will do though is, since I'm not going to try it on, I will pop up this little photo here. Please do not judge any dirty mirrors or mess in the background. This was just taken as a quick snapshot before I left for work. I will also add that Jackie was the inspiration for the scarf. She said what you need there is a scarf or a shawl to match. So anyway, I just threw on my little autumnal Vertices Unite, and I was really pleased with that outfit. I thought it was great. So, all right, before I start rambling on about my next finished object, which is why we're all here today, let me take a little sip of water. Yes, I am just drinking water out of the mug. I don't know, I just love my mug. Okay, moving on. So my next finished object, which I'm very excited about, is a colorwork project, and we're going to talk about the lessons that I learned. Some of you helped me learn these lessons, so I'm grateful for that. First, the yarn. I knit this in the dLana Merino. This is a 100% Spanish Merino, 125 meters to 50 grams. The recommended stitch size is 18 stitches by 26 rows. So I had this in stash for a couple years, and I just had a couple balls of it. I had actually intended this for my snow crocus sweater, but decided to pivot and go another direction. And when I saw the Bergman Sweater by Caitlin Hunter, I was like, okay, that is the yarn that I'm going to use. So I decided to purchase some more balls of it from MonTrictot, and they had it in various natural fiber colors, which you know me, I love a natural fiber color. So this is my Bergman. It is finished. That's the back. This is my Bergman. It is finished. So I have the dLana in the dark brown and the dLana in the gray. Now, this is a yarn, if you go on Ravelry and you look at the photos, they're not right. This one gets mixed up with the light gray, and this one gets mixed up with the light brown. And anyway, so this is dark brown and gray, not light gray, but gray. Let's see. Modifications for this, not a whole lot. Now I did knit down a smaller gauge. The pattern recommended gauge for this is 18 stitches by 28 rows. That felt like a weird gauge for me, and I actually had one of you back me up and saying that that was a bit odd. Too many rows for such a large stitch count. So I knew that in this yarn I wasn't going to get there. I generally do have a little bit of a larger row gauge, and it's not problematic. I kind of know when I need to knit to the row gauge and when I need to knit to the stitch gauge, and I just manage it with some math. So on this one, I knew that because it's a circular yoke, I really am in a colorwork yoke that I can't really divide up. I knew that I needed to be more mindful of my row gauge. So I ended up knitting this at a 20 stitch gauge and going up to a size 2 in order to compensate for that. I have not gone back and remeasured my finished row gauge, but my swatch row gauge was 20 stitches by 26 rows. So it's still slightly off. And what I did to help with that is I just did like one fewer round of short rows up here, and then it was perfectly fine. So the story of this sweater, this was a kind of I don't want to say spontaneous because I always swatch, but a more spontaneous cast on with my friend Kat, and we just decided we were going to do a Colorwork yoke sweater, and we cast on the same day. Now, Kat finished hers in like a week and a half, and this took me a full 3 weeks to knit. So she definitely beat me, but what was important is that I did get it done before her visit. Kat was here yesterday, and we took this cute photo in our Colorwork sweaters together, and it was just really great to have both of our sweaters finished and be able to spend some time together. So let me tell you why this one took me longer. It took me a week longer than it should have because I had a gauge issue. Oh, do I want to go there first? Actually, let me say this first. First, let me acknowledge you guys and how awesome you are. There are 3 or 4 folks who commented on the last episode to tell me, because I was asking you about color dominance, and there are 3 or 4 of you who commented and kind of gave me some really great, valuable advice from your own experience. And here's what I took away from that advice. 1, it doesn't matter if it's in my left or right hand. What is more important is the yarn that's over or under when I'm stranding it. And 2, that tension is actually more important than left or right hand as well. So anything that I'm going to have a more even tension is going to really kind of come to the forefront, and something with an uneven tension is going to recede to the back. So if you're an English style knitter and you have had this color dominance issue, maybe go back and look at the comments on the last video so that you can kind of read through those, because I have paraphrased, but there were some very, very knowledgeable answers on that episode. And thank you guys for sharing those with me. It made all the difference in me casting this on and feeling confident that I was making the right decision. So I think my advice would be swatch. You knew I was going to say it. Try it both ways. Try, you know, 1 yarn in each hand. Try, you know, both yarns in one hand. Try whichever color you want to use as dominant over, whichever one under, and just give it a go and see what you prefer. So in this pattern, I did decide on the top that my gray is my dominant color, or the color that I want to be kind of, and that was the other thing. Somebody said, don't use really dominant color because that's kind of a myth. So the color that I wanted to really pop and come to the foreground is the gray in the yoke. And then I actually switched that up on the hem and made it the brown on the hem as the pop of color. So speaking of swatching, okay, I did a really good, diligent job on swatching my Colorwork. I made these huge honking swatches, as you may remember. I did knit them in the round, and I felt really confident about those. Now, I lazy swatched my plain stockinette. I'm not even gonna lie. That's what I did. I knit them about this big and I knit them flat, and I was lazy about it. So that meant I had a gauge issue. I finished my body and I finished my arms and I did my try on. I had not yet bound off, because know this about me, I bind nothing off until the very end, because I know myself and I do not want to pick out a bind off. So anyway, I still had not bound off, and I tried it on, and I don't know how to describe this to you except that the body of the sweater looked rather mushroomy. And the middle of your waist is not really where you want anything to look mushroomy, am I right? Now, I happen to be watching Andrea Mowery's podcast, and she actually brought up this very thing. She was talking about tension and colorwork knitting, and she said one of the ways that you notice gauge and tension issues in colorwork is you will notice these bizarre kind of like bubbles, or that things like spread where they shouldn't necessarily spread, and that is going to be a gauge issue. So I stopped, I remeasured my gauge on my body versus my gauge on my colorwork, and I realized I was off by 2 stitches. Now, I know that we all like to say blocking can fix everything, but I just did not think that blocking could fix a 2-stitch gauge difference. So I ended up frogging the body back to the sleeve, because at that point I had already knit the sleeves and I was like, nope, I don't want to frog the sleeves. So I frogged the body back to the sleeves. I went down a needle size and then reknit the body and reknit the hem. Again, I did incorporate a couple decrease rows, or a couple decreases here. Oh, I had to incorporate a couple decreases because as part of my stitch gauge issue, I felt like I just needed a little more ease in the sweater. So I did cast on 2 additional stitches here, and then I just decreased them out at 3 and 5 inches. So anyway, the body was knit twice, and that is why I was so slow in getting this done. Not only was I slow in getting it done, but then I knitted so hard that, you guys, I threw out my elbow and I couldn't knit for 4 or 5 days. Until yesterday, I had not knit for a week, which is like, has never happened before. So I think it was the combination of trying to speed through the body and do the color work, and then my other whip that I'm going to show you in a bit. They were just not projects that I should have been working together. So I did not frog the sleeves, and I do have a little bit of poof in the sleeve, but I just decided I was cool with the sweatshirt style sleeve, that I was not cool with a mushroom body. Other than that, I've knit everything to pattern. Other than, if you notice, the collar is a 1x1 rib. That was a mistake. I messed that up. I decided that I wasn't going back in and I am leaving it. I'm perfectly fine with it. I did decide to do the suggested rib for the hem and the cuffs. And let me tell you why. Okay, I'm gonna point this out and then I'm gonna show it to you one more time so that I think you can see. You know how in like almost every project there's that small detail that you're just like, wow, the designer, they nailed that. This is one thing that I think Caitlin Hunter nailed. The color work feeds directly into the rib. So you can see that here, and it just like feeds straight down. And it feeds, I mean, not exactly straight there, but anyway, it just seems to really feed into the rib. So, and it's the same on the bottom hem. And so for that reason, I did decide to keep the suggested rib, and I am just okay with having a different rib in the neckline than in the bottom of the sweater. I would say on a scale of 1 to 10, this is like a 9.5 for me right now. So I'm very excited for it. We spent yesterday, so Kat used to live in my neighborhood here in East Nashville, but then she moved to Seattle, which was heartbreaking for me, but we have still managed to maintain a friendship via text and Instagram DM. And I have visited her there. She is home to visit her family for the holidays. So anyway, we took the morning yesterday and we kind of did a little urban hike through our neighborhood, went to some favorite coffee shops, and just walked around. And like I said, yesterday was very much fall. I was so warm here, a little breezy here. So having this being my first like real colorwork yoke sweater, I was like, I mean, I knew it would be different between the different parts of my body, but it did kind of make me laugh a bit. But anyway, so yeah, pretty pleased with this and so glad that I was able to get it done before Kat arrived. Another thing about it is that I was so panicked that I was not going to have enough yarn, and look, I have a ball and a half of this color left, and I have a good 3/4 of the dark brown. So I think my plan is that I'm actually going to knit a cowl with the hem colorwork pattern on it. I think that would be really nice. Also, since this is a crew neck, then a cowl will be really good for, you know, dog walking. Then I can still have a little something around my neck to keep me warm. So anyway, super glad I did not panic order more yarn because I was just fine. I do have a tendency to panic order yarn, and I don't think it's ever been necessary to this date. So that was really fun to work on that color work project. I have to admit that I feel like it's been a while since I've had something that like really challenged me and really forced me to learn a new technique. And I get it now. I understand why you all love color work so much. I am with you. I had the most fun knitting that, and I will definitely be doing more colorwork projects. Okay, so this is the Easter egg for this episode. What is your favorite colorwork pattern? Leave it down in the comments below. And 24 hours after this video airs, that's gonna be the cutoff. Now, this is not necessarily the pattern that you're gonna receive, but this is the Easter egg question. Then we'll email and figure out what pattern you'd like to be gifted. Anyway, I hope this is fun for you guys. Okay, let's move on to whips. I'm gonna start off with the most basic once again, and then we will kind of build up. So this huge honking swatch is the Isager Boucle in the burgundy. And then I've paired that with Isager Tvinni. It's spelled Tvinni, so we're going with Tvinni. And it has created this really cool fabric. Now, I am not going to at all claim that I came up with this yarn pairing on my own, because I did not. I was on Instagram and I saw, I think it was a post from, oh God, I always get her name wrong. Lene Samso Home, something like that. Lynette, who, you know, I love her patterns already. So I should probably learn the name. But anyway, so I saw a swatch with these two yarns paired together, and my mind was blown. I just loved the texture on this. So I had 3 skeins of the Tvinni instead. No, 3? I think I just lied to you. I'm pretty sure, because I think Modern Daily Knitting had them on like super sale for $11 a skein. They're usually $27 a skein. I think I bought 6. I don't know where I got 3 from. That makes no sense to me. I'm pretty sure I had 6 skeins of this in stash, which is way more than what I need for any one sweater quantity. So anyway, it's a fingering weight yarn. It is, I believe, a 100% merino yarn, but it is a very rustic merino, and it has a little bit of a yellow undertone that I am not the biggest fan of the color. So this was a great way to be able to use some of this yarn and combine it with one that I have been interested in trying, which is the Isager Boucle. This is my first time knitting with Boucle yarn. I only bought 1 ball of this as a way to kind of not go crazy if I didn't like knitting with it or didn't like how this swatch knit up. And so I do need to order more. I love to order from Wool & Company. If you guys aren't familiar and you're in the States, definitely check them out. But this is my giant kind of test swatch to see what my gauge would be with those. So then I used my kind of gauge filter on Ravelry to figure out what I wanted to knit. And when I do the gauge filter, I always go 1 or 2 stitches. I normally go about 2 stitches in either direction, because I figure it can be a little loose, and I know how to do gauge math well enough that I can usually find something. So my experience of knitting with the Boucle on the swatch is that I find it interesting, but I do not think I would care to knit a whole sweater in it. It's very finicky, and it is sometimes quite challenging to get your needle through the right part of the yarn. So I decided that I was going to choose something that was going to be a quick, easy knit, not very large. And I have chosen the Totally Tubular Tank from Park Knits. And whoa, that really changed the color, didn't it? Wow, that was crazy. I don't know if that will show on camera, but my viewfinder just went from like bright to very dark right as I pulled this up. So obviously it's not playing nicely. So this is a very simple little kind of tank top, but with a large roll neck turtleneck on it, hence the name Totally Tubular Tank. Totally turtle tank. Totally tubular turtle tank. I don't know, there's a lot of T's in this pattern name. I'm gonna obviously put it in the details below so that we don't have to sit here all day while I figure this out. So I think the pattern was originally knit at a 14 stitch gauge. I am knitting this at a 16 stitch gauge. My row gauge is the same. So I've gone again up a size, but this time I don't have to make any mods for row gauge, so I just kind of get to knit on as it is. And I am doing this specifically to wear under blazers. I am moving to a new work location next year, and I will need to kind of dress them a bit more upscale. So thought this would be a great way to do that. My plan is I'm gonna finish what is left of my Boucle ball, and then I'm going to order one more. So the pattern says that I will need basically 2.5 balls of that Boucle. I don't want a half ball lying around. So I'm gonna just try to do it on 2 balls. We'll see how that works out. I think I can do it because I am gonna knit it a little more cropped than the pattern. I'm not gonna do the kind of long rib hem. I'm gonna do just a normal rib hem. It's not gonna be split. It's gonna be made to wear with like high waist skirts and work pants. And then I can always do, you know, I love a mock neck, so I can always do a mock neck instead of a full on roll over turtleneck if I need to keep it within those 2 balls of yarn. But I think I will be just fine. And again, I just really love this texture. I think it's such a different thing from what I'm used to knitting. So I'm pretty pleased with how this is knitting up so far. I've only been working on this like a week, and I think 4 days of that I had to take off because I couldn't knit. So it does work up very, very quickly. I also will add that I am in a total color mode. You will see this burgundy later on, so if the lighting is weird for half the episode, it just is what it is. I think a lot of people are in this burgundy mode right now. Are you finding that too? It's all over Instagram, and I've had a few people message me and say, oh, look at this yarn, I love this color, and it's always burgundy. So I think that is just the general vibe for this fall. It is the must-have color in my book at the moment. Whips, whips, whips. Okay. I have 2 more for us to chat about. The first one almost like makes me get weepy, or the next one, because that was the first one. The next one almost makes me get weepy. Okay. So it's kind of amazing how sometimes knitting shows you a lot about life. I don't know if you have this experience, but at times in life we get in our own way, and that's because we're, you know, trying to bring something to fruition, and maybe I feel like it should be not perfect. That's not the right word, but I feel like it can be better. Like it's not as good as I can make it, or it's not as good as it should be or needs to be, and then I just tend to shy away from jumping in. This will make sense in just a minute when I tell you what I'm working on. But then like once I jump in, actually, you know what? My work wasn't as bad as I thought it was, or whatever I was, you know, bringing into being wasn't as bad as I thought it was. Does that make any sense whatsoever? Like, I guess what I'm trying to say is sometimes we just have to get out of our own way, right? So I took up spinning earlier this year, and I haven't really done a lot of it. I've been fairly sporadic about it. But with Kat being here yesterday, it just like really inspired me. Kat is also learning how to spin. We started around the same time with learning how to spin, and she's already been knitting with her handspun, and I have not. And several months ago, well, actually, I guess right after I decided that I wanted to learn how to spin, Madison, who you may also know from her podcast, and I will link Madison down below. Madison is a super talented fiber artist. Anything to do with fiber, it seems to come naturally to her. Even she's taken up weaving recently and is just killing it. So Madison very sweetly sent me some fiber. She said, I just want you to play with this, just have fun, do not worry about it. So she sent me 2 different fibers, one of which was some BFL from 3 Waters Farm, 2 Creeks Farm, 2 Rivers Farm. I don't know. It's a number and a water. And she intended it for me to work on a fractal spin. So I did finally do my first fractal, and I had the plied yarn just still hanging out in skeins, but I had not washed and finished it yet. So I did do that yesterday after Kat left. And this is my finished fractal. Now, if I were a good Instagrammer or podcaster, I would have taken a photo of this skein before I wound it, but I didn't. But it is the skein that was featured kind of in the intro video. So I came across the hold on, I have to look up the name of this one. This one I actually really do want to get right for you. I came across today the Moonfish Dickey. So let me show you. I'm going to be better about this than I was the last one. This is the photo. And so this is a mosaic Dickey, or collar, whatever you want to call it, but I think the designer's calling it a Dickey, so that's what I'm going for. That comes down basically to here in the front and then also in the back. So it is mosaic, and it only requires less than 100 yards of the kind of color change contrast color yarn. So as a new hand spinner, I ended up getting 150 in this skein, and then I have a couple other small sample skeins that I did as well. So with 150 in this one, I'm confident I can get this project done. And also it's mosaic. So is Casey still doing her mosaic madness, mosaic mania cowl? If she is, Casey, this is my entry into your cowl that I probably will not post on Instagram, therefore will not win, but I am with you in spirit. So I decided to go deep stash and pull out some very old Quince & Co. Lark as my main color. And so this is what I am knitting up. Now, I don't know what color this is. This has been around so long and is in so many, and I don't even know how it ended up in these tiny little balls. It's in like so many small balls. Like what happened, I don't know. That I could not even begin to tell you what color that was, but I had it, and it can be an immediate cast on. And you guys, oh my goodness, I did my swatch and immediately, oh, my swatch is still tied to one of my samples. I did not swatch this for gauge. I swatched this for color and texture and just to make sure that I liked the pattern. So this is what we've got. This is the Quince & Co. And then I also tried it with this, this more subtle brown gray, which is Cascade 220. Okay, so I decided to go with the Quince & Co. I don't know if you watch Sarah from It's a Sarah, but she always talks about heart jumping knits, and this was heart jumping. This was not. Now, I asked my husband, who is very good with color, I will say. I often look to him for advice, and he said to go with this one. I'm curious. I mean, you all already know what I chose, but I'm curious to know what you would have chosen. I just felt like this is heart jumping, so let me go with the one that is bringing me the most joy. Also, what Kat and I were chatting about yesterday is that we want our accessories to bring the drama more so than our sweaters. It just feels a little bit like less non-committal to a huge like dramatic sweater. I do have one of those in my whips to show with you, or to share with you. So anyway, I did decide to go with the Quince & Co. Now, I also really love the combination of the hand spun with either of these two. That is because I am generally not the biggest fan of yarns that are super round and super like even in color. I love some character to my yarn. I love a nubbly yarn. I love some color variation, and I get pretty bored with yarns like this. There's just nothing about this yarn that makes my heart jump. So pairing it with the hand spun, I think is a great solution. And I cast it on this morning, and you guys look, this is where like Can you tell I just wanted to do this all day? I did manage to peel myself off the couch to go to the grocery store, but otherwise I've pretty well just wanted to work on this ever since I cast it on earlier this morning. So I am a repeat and a half in. And I am officially obsessed with how this is knitting up. This is a bold choice for me and a little bit unexpected, I recognize, but I'm pretty excited. It might be a little wide, so when I block it, I'm probably gonna try to stretch some length of it just to make it a bit less wide. I don't know. Like I said, I didn't swatch for gauge. I just dove in. And I am really having so much fun with it. I hate that I waited this long to kind of knit with my Handspun, and yeah, I just feel so much more inspired now to be able to incorporate Handspun into more projects. I am completely tangled in this whip. So let me get my little remnant balls of my lark put away, and then we will move on to the last whip. I think, as you can tell, I am losing the light, so I'm a little nervous now that when I pull this whip out, it's really gonna get dark in here. This one I'm actually not gonna spend too much time with because you're gonna be seeing this one many times in the future. First I swatched this, and this is just a gorgeous Targhee DK from Coyote Run Fiberworks. And then I swatched in the intended yarn for this pattern, which is the Camarose Lamauld. Okay, so giant swatches. Why? Again, I am swatching to like know my gauge, but also when it comes to a cable project where I'm going to have this many, and maybe I'll show you in this because it's going to be easier with the light. Where I'm going to have this many intricate cables in a pattern, and especially with how this particular pattern is written, which I will share with you in a minute, I like to swatch to see how the cables kind of play with each other. So when I'm not going to cross necessarily on the same row for every cable, like this crosses on every right side row, this crosses on every right side row, but in a different place, and this crosses every 7th right side row. So when I'm gonna cross them in different kind of frequencies and sequences, then I do like to do a swatch of all the cable patterns together so that I can really get a good idea of how they're going to play. And then it makes me feel more confident going into the actual pattern. So I did decide to go with this yarn, one, because again, I am just in a burgundy mood, and I did prefer the fabric here. So this is the Camarose Lamauld, and this is, they're calling it an Aran weight yarn. It's 100 meters to 50 grams. So this is 50% llama and 50% wool. And I have not knit with llama before, so that was why I was so excited to knit with this. Okay, so I need to yarn nerd for a minute. I will try not to make this too painful, but I would not have chosen this yarn for cables. Here's why. This is a single ply Z-twist yarn. So your twist in your yarn is either going to be S-twist, which is what we typically knit with. So this is going to be an S-twist yarn. Or it's going to be Z-twist, which is kind of just twisted in the other way. Now the thing about a Z-twist yarn is that it untwists as you knit with it. And that, if you're doing stockinette, is probably pretty fine. But when you're doing cables, and like me, you don't use a cable needle to cable, that makes it a heck of an ordeal to get your stitches back on your needle. So I have found this yarn to be very splitty, and I find that I have to really, really grip the yarn. Now I'm using wooden needles. I love wooden needles. I cannot imagine how slippery this would be on a metal needle, but I decided to play through the pain, literally, because I just love this fabric. It is just so squishy. I mean, not squishy. it has such a lovely drape. This one is super squishy, and I just feel like it would have created a completely different garment. So now let me share with you what garment I am talking about. I am talking about the Boreas sweater by Aegyoknit. And that sweater brings the drama, doesn't it? So this is if you're not familiar with Aegyoknit, she is a Danish designer, and they have a really interesting way of taking traditional elements but putting a very modern contemporary twist on them. So I love the neckline on this. Now it is a little bit deep, so I do anticipate having to make quite a few modifications to bring this sweater to fruition. And I am making extensive notes on my Ravelry, and I'm doing those as I go, mainly because whatever I do on one panel of the front, I'm gonna have to do on the other panel. And with the number of modifications that I'm making, I need to have those good notes. So, like I said, I normally don't cable with a cable needle, but for this one, I do have a 10 stitch cable where I have to put 5 on a cable needle at a time. And with this yarn being both so slippery and so splitty, I have employed my cable needle for that one cable. So far I have my back panel, and I have started my neckline on my front. I'm not going to go into all the modifications that I'm making because I don't know if these are going to stick. There is a fairly high likelihood of frogging, so we will talk modifications as I get more into the pattern. But if you want to follow along, I don't know why you would, unless you're just like obsessed with this pattern or knitting it on your own. You can find my modifications in real time on Ravelry. But this is where we are so far. We're here. So anyway, and it is like a super oversized sweater, which obviously concerns me. The last cable sweater that I knit from Aegyoknit, I honestly don't wear very much because it was so oversized. So this time I'm just trying to be more mindful of basically I'm making a one size smaller so that it fits me better. And I am doing this with a support group. So there may be some other podcasters out there. I'm gonna let them share who they are in their own podcasts. But I did start a Boreas slow burn support group for those of us who are gonna work through this pattern. So I think we're not in any rush. And it is just kind of a really in-depth pattern that we anticipate making some mods to. So we are just kind of helping each other through it. Anyhow, okay guys, well, I guess I should also mention that my Bergman, any notes that I made, anything that I did to that pattern, I also made some pretty good Ravelry notes. I'm trying to get better about that. I cannot promise you finished object photos because I frankly just don't take many of those anymore, but I am at least like throwing up a photo and I'm making notes. So, I mean, I am who I am, just love me, okay? Anyway, you guys, it's been so much fun sitting down with you. I am so sorry that it's been a month. It probably will be another month. It's just that, you know, I want to come to you when I have stuff to say and I'm excited to share, and then that way it doesn't feel forced, and that way we just get to have fun. Anyway, thanks for spending time with me. Don't forget to leave your Easter egg comment, and I'll see you soon.